welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to go through a video about something we get quite a few comments or quite a few questions about, and in the field of extreme or ultra long range shooting, and that is seeing your impacts. Probably one of the most important ingredients to actually getting the job done, getting shots done. Now, I want to go through, there's a couple of misnomers about this sort of thing and the logic that goes with it, and then I'll go through some of the conditions and so show some of those images and what I'm talking about to try and make sense of it for people. To start off with, there's a lot of people that may think that ELR shooting is done in the way of the sniper extreme long range shot, or the extreme long range shooting in the fact of if you can do it really well, then it's you're one shot and you're done. That isn't really the case. ELR shooting doesn't really work in that world without a big hunk of luck on your side. Real extreme long range shooting, including real extreme long range sniper shots, where in the military and in all forms, are done at best with a small number of shots. Your first shot is going to be, you want to be able to see your first shot, and then you adjust from your first shot. And if everything is really good and you are really good and your equipment is really good, then you might get it done in 2, you might get it done in 3, you might get it done in 4, but you can get onto there. And there's a few things you're discovering when you send things out there, but there is no magic equation, there is no magic algorithm, there is no magic piece of equipment that is going to tell you exactly what your bullet is going to go through to get into an extreme long range shot. And once again, I'll go through what I call an extreme long range shot. All sorts of people have all sorts of definitions. Half the world arguments are about definitions. What I'm talking about when I talk extreme long range, I'm talking when a bullet has gone subsonic. So it's gone through the transonic zone, it is in a subsonic place, and we're generally talking about taking something into the 2,500 yards, 2,800 yards, 3,000 yards, 3,300 yards, extreme long range shooting. And that obviously can also be shorter ranges with different rounds, but we're really tall, different calibers, different size rifles. The topic of this conversation is really out past the 2,500 yard mark. Now the reason I'm talking those distances, and I should say that's with lots of different calibers.
Oh, wind's low.
Well, I got across enough, didn't I?
Yeah, 6 o'clock, 3/4 of target low. Left and tall, 1.5 targets left, half target tall. Tall, level with the left edge of plate, half target tall. Tall, just over the top of plate, 1 o'clock.
Chasing the wind, chasing the
ocean. It's incredible.
3,000 yards with something like a 375 Shy-Tac, I don't really consider that extreme long range for that caliber.
Oh, just off the bottom edge. 5 o'clock, dust. Hit! Got him! Bottom right corner.
The reason I'm talking about those ranges is because your vision changes. There's lots of things that change, there's lots of things in the shot as well, but vision is a very key part of it. And that might not seem likely to a lot of people, and I think that's what causes problems for a lot of people. They've been shooting at 2,000 yards or at 2,000 metres or at 2,300 yards or something like that, and they've found it all really quite sensible. It shoots. Obviously your winds and things can change things, depend on your environment and your conditions, and the terrain and all that sort of things can change, and you start to see the problems that we run into in the real long stuff. But the vision is still quite comparable from 1,000 yards to 2,000 yards with reasonable equipment. There's not a lot of difference, is the truth of it. You can still see very clearly. You can see most things. You can still see bullet splash off your hard steel targets if you're using them. You can see pieces of grass, things move. It all is a lot easier in at those sort of distances. Once you step out past the 2,500 yard mark, I suppose, where it starts to really start to change, and then amplifies from then on. And it can really change things. You really lose definition to a marked degree. Now, being experienced at it, and I suppose to a degree, there's a lot of our videos that make it look very simple. You can see the dust, you can see the dirt. It's so easy. And I'm sure there's people who think that would be easy. I'll just do a shot there and I can see that, and then adjust properly and I'll shoot there, and that's easy. Why'd you take more than 2 shots? There's other things going on, like I said, conditions, and all sorts of things, from wind changes and all sorts of things that I'd go into that. That's not the topic of this video. The topic is, in actual fact, a lot of those things you see are very well set up by the conditions we choose to shoot in. So, the conditions we're actually talking about. To start off with, there's lots of different brackets to go with this, but the first one I'd go with is the time of day we shoot. And what I'm talking about there is basically your sun, and what you're dealing with is your main light source, no matter how you look at it, is your sun, and the angle of the sun, and also including the conditions of the air. Now, generally, the sun behind you, so it's actually looking at the target, is the way, is probably the nicest way to shoot. It puts good light on whatever your target is. It puts a nice clean angle of light where the light's actually coming in, and what that's doing is a couple of things that a lot of people don't realise. One is you get, like your headlights on or straight on the actual ground, so you get very clear vision. The other thing is your morning light tends to be sharper and has more definition to it. Even though you'll have brighter light in the middle of the day, that light is coming in and bouncing in from everywhere. So you start to lose your contrast and have just a brighter, more oblique, or a brighter, less contrasty vision in the middle of the day. That's one of the topics we're talking about. There's another thing that we're talking about there is in being early in the day or late in the day, is your mirage, your blurriness in your air tends to be a lot less. So you tend to have a lot better definition, so you can see things a lot clearer. But another feature that a lot of people are not aware of, and you can see it in our videos, and I'll try and put some clips in to show that, is what you're actually seeing by having the light immediately behind you, is when you get your dirt come up in front, you actually don't necessarily see the dirt as much as you see the shadow of the dirt. Although it looks like the actual dirt, what's actually happening is that dirt flies up, immediately behind it is its shadow. So you get a nice dark sensation of that dirt coming up because you have the shadow you're actually looking at, because the sun is coming that way. If you wait to when the sun's higher, and you can find it can be as little as an hour, but more likely 2 or 3 hours afterwards, is that the sun's then coming down. Then you might have really lovely dusty conditions, but because your dust is the same color as your dirt, you don't have any real definition to go with it. Now, with very clear vision and being a lot closer with a lot less air to look through, you'll see that dust cloud come up. But unless you've got something to contrast it against, i.e. the sun is behind you, so early in the morning where it comes in, it gives you a nice shadow, it's far less easy to see. And you would be surprised. Unless you know where you're looking, you have you know, in some cases you've got a split second to see this image to be able to pick it up to train your eye over there. So I have the advantage of a very experienced spotter who's very used to looking for things, I've also given her and myself precise time frames of when I expect the bullet to land. We've narrowed it down. We tend to know enough about her conditions to know where we're looking. But you have to keep in mind that when you're shooting over the likes of a 2500, 2800, 3000 yard shot, is that you can't see all the winds. There's no, like I said, there's no app that's going to tell you what's going on. You can't see the high wind that bullet's going to go through. So it could well be 50 meters, 50 yards, even 100 yards to one side or the other side of where you think it's going. So when that's nice and clear and you've got a nice bright bit of dirt, you'll see it out of your line of sight, but you'll see it and you'll come it up. You'll work out where it is, make your adjustments, and you're onto target nice and quickly. But if you haven't got that clear vision, and if you've got something that is visible but only visible if you're staring at it, well, you're not going to see it. As simple as that. So like I said, that's one of the things, and I suppose that moves into another thing about those conditions, is that it depends on the dirt you're shooting at. One of the most ideal things we've got to shoot at is when we've got a paddock that's largely been stripped, so it's a nice clean paddock, but it's got stubble all over it, so it's got nice bright white, bright yellow stubble. We're shooting into black or brown or grey paddock. There's a nice definition between the two. You would think that nice, flat, even dirt would be really nice, and there's nothing on it so you can see everything, and up close you can. But if you don't have the definition, if you've got bright light everywhere and you've just got dust coming up that's the same colour as the dust you're shooting in, that paddock is no longer ideal. So now I'm going to chop and change a little bit with some of the stuff I want to talk about here to try and give you all this information. But another detail that happens in that extreme long range shooting is your terrain shape. Now, what I'm talking about there is, as in all shooting, and the simple logic, and I've heard it repeated to me, yes, of course I got the terrain right. You know, so you've got, whether you've got a steep backdrop you're shooting against, or you've got a slight raising terrain where it's going up, or you're shooting from a hill down onto flat ground, but you can see that ground flowing away from you. It only actually takes a slight deviation in that ground to end up where you can't see an area. Now, you would think that's obvious, because you would think you look through your scope and you can see this ground's close and you can see the little rise, and then that ground's a long way away. No, you can't. You can't see it at all. And you can look at a place where if you watch someone walk up that thing from your shooting position, you would see their ankles and even their shins and even their knees disappear as they walk through this area, and then they come back out on the other side. But you can't see any difference in this ground to that ground, so you don't get to see this undulation. It's another trap for this sort of thing. Guys who've said, you know, they fired some shots and they saw some and they couldn't see anything else, and then they couldn't figure out what was going on. And we've been in this situation where all of a sudden you can't see where the impacts are going. You can get to the point, and I must stress how frustrating this can be. You can get to the point of wondering if there's bullets coming out the end of the gun, because you're firing off these even large caliber rounds and can't see any evidence in whatsoever. That can be as simple as that. There's a slight dip in your vision. You can't see the ground. And with conditions where you haven't got shadows and things, where you can't see that general dust coming up, you can't see that spike, so you need to be able to see the ground to see that spike, to see that disturbance, is that can make bullets that you saw a couple, then they all disappeared. They can just have gone over that rise, and that's what's going on. Now, with experience, you'll learn things to do in the situation, understand things. You'll learn to back out, come back 100 yards and try again, and then work forward and that side of things. And I should say that's a fundamental way to get onto a long range target when you're struggling, is come back in, or if you're trying to get to shoot further. I was shooting at 2,000 yards, now I want to shoot at 3,000 yards and just go and do that. That can be a monumental step you're taking. To do it and going 2,400 yards, 2,800 yards, 3,000 yards, take step by step so you understand your conditions as you get there. As I said, Early morning is one of the places I started with. Late evening is another place. We've been there where the early morning stuff didn't work. A slight different change of angle, slightly different dirt, and all of a sudden we couldn't see anything. And extreme stuff, going from 4,500 yards to, or 4,300 yards to 5,000 yards. There's only 700 yards in that. Why would that be a problem? We've found it a massive problem ourselves and found that we couldn't use in the conditions we're in, we couldn't use the morning light. No matter how nice we made it, we couldn't make it work. We worked in the opposite direction, where we had light coming back in against us, so that then we could see the halo essentially created by the light coming from the other side, which gives you that same thing. We're talking about a contrast, and we're talking about the light coming through it, so then it made a halo we're actually looking at, or made the bright dust spike.
Left. 2 targets left, 1 target low.
All right, certainly sneaking up on it.
Sure is, mate. That's good. Oh, just behind it. Just to the left edge, I see dust, like behind it.
Looks really simple and obvious when you see the video doing that side of things, but it meant about getting all the light in the right angles to be able to see that sort of stuff. And I get it also in the light story. I get it in the sun story. Is for most people, shooting in extreme long range isn't something they can do next door. So they have to. It's a weekend thing, or it's a whole day thing, and they're up early in the morning. They drive out there and they get out there, and then it's lunchtime, and then that's when they're starting to shoot. I understand the logistics of it, but the truth of it is, it doesn't. The light doesn't care about your logistics. The shooting doesn't care about logistics. It's not about when it's easy to do, it's about what you have to do to get it done. And I should come back to another point. In the world of, there's a school of thought that you should be able to do your shooting at any time, because if you had to do this stuff, then you would make it happen. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. That's the whole thing about ELR shooting. It is not shooting you can do in any conditions, in any circumstances. It is simply not shooting you can do. You get a laser-guided bullet that's making corrections, a missile, that type of thing. Okay, it's different. But in the world of trying to do this sort of shot, it's only going to be able to be done in the right conditions. If you had to make it happen, then you are going to wait for the conditions. And that's the simple scenario we're talking about in ELR shooting. Now, bring it back down to where you're not pushing those boundaries quite to that level, then yes, it all is conceivable. And the better you are, and the better your equipment, and the more repeatable you are at doing it, and the more you understand about everything that's in front of you, the closer you'll get. And yes, it definitely becomes easier. When you know you can get your bullet within a metre of that target, it becomes a lot easier. You're able to put a lot more power into that image. You're able to do a lot more there. But don't get me wrong, there's been situations where, and we've got video, I'll see if I can find that, but we've got video where you can hear the bullet was striking within, and I shouldn't say 1 metre, but within 10 metres of the target, the bullet striking. Let's come back down to where I can see.
Did not say.
At 5 kilometres, we couldn't see a damn thing, not one little thing. And I come back to, if that strike was happening at something in those conditions, if we were in it at 3 kilometres, there would not be a problem. We'd have been able to see that. We're obviously very experienced at it. And I'm not trying to blow our own trumpet, but I will say there is a degree of learning what to look for, learning when to look, learning when to put your intensity into it. And the truth is, I'm not the one that can see that. I'm not the one that spots that. My little spotter is the one that is trained and experienced at doing that, and she's the one that will spot that. I have heard many times a call of, I could see the grass move there. I saw that leaf flick up there. I saw the grass move there. I saw that bit of crop drop down there. I saw that thing there, and we work from that. And I suppose that's the other piece I'd like to say to go with this, is that this is, and in all ELR stuff, the way you get better is by going through this hard stuff, going through, and whether that's stepping up 100 yards at a time to get where you're going and learning all the way, or whether that's fighting where you're at and being calm enough, patient enough, strong enough, whatever it is to get through that pain and to make sense of it. One of the things that we certainly do and try and bring to the table very much so is we try and make sense of it every time. And we've been out there, especially with our extreme long range, and trying to make sense of things, both at when we're doing 4Ks and struggling with a bullet that wasn't making there and had to figure it out. It came back from when we were first trying to shoot 2 miles and trying to make sense of where things were going, to when this year when we're struggling with the conditions and trying to shoot at 5Ks. Every time we do that, I try and make sense of it. So for us, a good day is that we took a step forward. That doesn't mean we hit the target. That doesn't mean that we conquered all the problems. But if we made something where we saw where this we could have done better, that's a good day. And as an example, we got to the point where we changed over to where it was the afternoon that we shot in. Our first time we did that, this is a long time ago, and we decided to shoot in the afternoon and see what actually happened. And we couldn't see to start off with, it was too glary. At the end of shooting 50 bullets on that particular day, this is probably 5 years ago, we started to see things. We started to see something out of it. That was something that was awesome. We found a way. I understood what was going on. I understood the beginning of what was going on, but that went from frustration of what are we doing here? What are we doing wrong? What am I doing wrong with my loading? What am I doing wrong with my shooting? With Sam's judging herself and what's she doing with our spotting? That went to, okay, we can change this around and we can fix this. We've been to the place where very early days where we're shooting out there, we could see things before, we can't see things now. We walked around out there until we found impacts. Spent an hour walking around. We're fortunate enough to find some impacts. Because I tend to go with the logic, if it's not working, there's some times where I'll keep moving and try and make sense of things. There are other times where I will then run 10 rounds in exactly that same shot. Exactly that same shot. To see if there's something else we should be looking. We'll look different places and I will shoot the same place. In those conditions, in that instance, we found a group of 10 bullets. A nice neat little group at that particular one there was 3,600 yards and a nice neat little bunch of bullets that were shooting into moss, dry moss, but you could see why there wouldn't have been much dust from them, but there was a 2 metre group of bullets. So then I could go back to, okay, I know what I was doing. I know what I had dialed in. That was all about the right place. I hadn't allowed for the wind. It was 50 yards away from where I thought I was going. But my light condition, and like I said, I won't analyse it any more than that. But it was something that was a real lesson. And I suppose in a large degree, that's what we enjoy about our ELR shooting. But it is something that is, I can only explain it in its rudimentary forms, but it is one of the ingredients of getting this job done. Another thing that I should say that people ask us about and mention or maybe expect is going to happen is bullet trace. Because at 800 yards and 1,000 yards and 1,200 yards and 1,500 yards and probably in different conditions further than that, and there's lots of conditions that involve bullet trace, not really going to get too much into it, but it doesn't work in ELR shooting, not the really long stuff. ELR, the bullet trace is not relevant for the really long stuff. Now, I won't say in absolutely all conditions it doesn't work. I've maybe in some of the mountainous conditions and things like that. Largely, bullet trace to start off with is talking about a pressure cone, which is far more relevant in a high-speed bullet. So in supersonic travel, yes, it's relevant. When we're talking a bullet that is gone subsonic, as I said, most ELR stuff, we're in subsonic world. We've got less we're talking about, but the bigger deal is the fact that out there we don't have that definition. You don't have that sharp, crystal clear definition that you need to see that disturbance of air, that pressure change in the air that bullet trace actually is. So the simple rule is for us, the simple thing is we don't use bullet trace at all. Not found it relevant, not found we could use it. When we do come back in and shoot at closer ranges, even at 1,000 yards, and like I said, up to 1,500 yards, it's a little bit of a novelty for us. It comes back and there's our bullet trace again. You get to watch it, you get to see it, that side of things. But as I said, not relevant for ELARs, not a feature you can use. So the cross section of what I'm talking about, the main thing is your light. Your conditions are the ability to see it. Those things, you need the light and the right angles, you need the right conditions to do it. You need to have a consistent platform to be able to work with the trouble. So you need, from your ammunition to your shooting to your technique to your rifle to everything needs to be very consistent. More for two reasons. One, you want to get on target or hold a good group or that sort of stuff. You need all that side of things. But the real thing you need that about is to be able to make sense of things. The place that it really wears you down is making sense of things, especially if you can see one periodically. If you haven't experienced it, then you don't realize just how frustrating that can be and just how confidence destroying that can be. When you see one and then can't see the next five, unless you have a lot of confidence in you're doing, you're going to end up wanting to smash the gun against a tree. It gets very frustrating, the fact that you can't control what's going on there. The conditions can cause that. But if you are not confident in what you're doing or your system isn't working as well as it should be, then that is something that you don't want to carry into that world. But if you do want to go through this, then these are some tips. Basically, the most important thing I can say, if you've got an area that does work and a time of day that you don't have any choices, you've got to do this, this is when you're going to go and shoot, this is when you're going to do this sort of stuff, then build up on your shooting area. Even if you can't shoot at that particular spot, which does touch on another thing I'll get back to, but even if you can't get to that spot without just being able to lead up, you haven't got a nice long paddock, there's just one area you're going to shoot at, then still find another spot you can come back to and verify things. Try and get in the same valley or the same area so you can get an idea of your wind, so you can shoot at that point and get an idea of what your wind's doing. It's not going to be the same, but it's potentially at least going to be similar. You can also see and verify things and make sure that your group is working. So whether that's coming back to 1,200 yards or 2,400 yards or 3,000 yards, whatever it is, come back to where you can make sense. And if it doesn't, come back further until it makes sense. There is no point, generally no point in pounding away, frustrating yourself if it's not working. The other bit, the point that I was going to come back to is the area you're shooting in. Yes, a well set up rifle is capable of one MOA group, so why would you need more than 5 MOA around your target? In theory that makes sense. In practice, you don't know what the wind's doing.
Right, just right and low. 3 targets low, 8 targets right, so it was just in the tree branches.
You need a 10 MOA group at a minimum to be able to shoot into, to be able to find that first shot. You don't know what's going on, then if you've only got a 5 MOA group or a 10 MOA group even around your target, and you've got more wind than you realise and you don't understand that, and you can have more different pressure than what you realise, you can have wind coming in your face or pushing with you, you can shoot out of that group quite easily. And a really nice group that you make the wrong corrections to doesn't help you at all. You don't get to see anything. So bigger areas to start off with, a decent size area, or bring your shots back, are all clues to try and help with doing this sort of stuff. But listen, that's what I wanted to tell you. The light, the ground, the conditions, the shape of the ground, that sort of stuff, the colour of the ground versus like I said, what's actually going to come up, understanding what's going on. Obviously whether it's dry or it's wet, all that sort of stuff is what's going to fly up. Like I said, is very relevant. The key points I want to say is that yes, it can be quite simple and can be quite easy to see, but it doesn't. The conditions don't have to change much, and it's very, very hard to see. The other big point I want to make is no, it can't always happen. In some places it can't be done. In some conditions it can't be done. Sometimes a day it can't be done. It's simply not going to happen. Yes, if you have the magic recipe and the perfect gun and you know exactly the MOA, then all you got to see is you hit on target. But that there's a big hunk of magic or a big hunk of luck involved with doing that. With good conditions, good skill, understanding what's going on with your weather, then yes, you can get on there in only a few shots. But it is sometimes a more monumental task than you might give credit. Anyway, that's to try and help people out with that. I hope that makes sense. I am trying to help those people who get in that frustrated place and try and make it all enjoyable. And it is, to me, it's very much worth the challenge, but it is one. Anyway, guys, thanks for checking us out. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Down below here, we've got a link to our web store where we have some of the specialised long-range shooting products that we actually produce. Check them out.
And for those of you who can, it'd be great to get some help. In our store we have support bits, and when you purchase those, the money goes direct to our channel and helps us bring these videos to you.
Thanks, guys.
See you next time.